Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome today to Thursday. I don't know if it's bright and sunny outside for you, but the sun is shining here for me, and very glad that it's a little warm today. I think over the weekend it's going to get a lot colder. So we're happy to have you here today. My name is Rita Reynolds. I'm the CIO for the National Association of Counties. And the webinar that we have today is on Zero Trust Security and Data Privacy Approach for Counties. Before we get started, I would like to just cover a few housekeeping items. And just a reminder, I'm going to let Brittany Gillardian do this slide for us. So Brittany is our Technology Program Associate. So Brittany, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining the webinar. So before I turn it over to our speaker, just wanted to remind you of a few items. When you're entering the meeting, be sure to mute yourself. And once you enter the meeting, we'd like you to ensure that your full name is displayed properly. So please click on the three dots and scroll down, and you'll see the option to rename and ensure that your name is spelled properly. And if we do call on you to ask a question, we do request that you turn on your video. This ensures for the most optimal interaction. And be sure to use the chat whenever you have questions. And I'll turn over to Rita to introduce our speaker.
All right, thank you, Brittany. Today's webinar, we're going to cover how important zero trust is. I didn't realize how long that phrase had been around, but definitely longer than a couple years. But it's especially important when it comes to identifying not just your employees, but also your county customers or the residents of your county. We all know that a username and password isn't sufficient anymore. And our presenter today is going to cover, in layman's terms, how a county can improve the protection of your end users as well as your county data. And you know what? This is even more important now, considering some of the changing requirements that we're seeing in areas like cyber insurance. So let me introduce to you our speaker. We have with us today Ryan Schaller. He is the Senior Customer Identity and Access Management Specialist. Ryan, a whole new title. I wasn't aware of that one, but we are happy to have him. He does work for Okta. And Ryan has a vast experience in technology focused on the customer identity area. He's very passionate about unifying the customer identity solution that is both connected, but also secure. And Ryan is residing in sunny, I hope it's sunny, Ryan, San Diego. And he's done quite a few different IT positions throughout his career. Prior to Okta, Ryan held the position of lead platform solutions engineer at Box, or as I call it, Box.com. So Ryan, thank you for joining us today. You do have quite the background in some entrepreneurial activities as well, I noticed. But today we're going to focus on what you have to share with us on improving security and data privacy. So thank you for taking your time out of your schedule, and we're going to turn it over to you. I believe you have some slides to share. So while Ryan is getting his slides up, just want to thank all of you that are in attendance today. This is being recorded, and we will share the recording out after the webinar is complete. Ryan, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Rita and Brittany, for having me today. And again, thank you for everybody that is attending. Really appreciate you taking the time to at least consider security as more of a proactive approach. If there's nothing else that you get from today's conversation, I really hope that starts to become more of a focused mentality. So we're going to jump into some topics today around zero trust mentality and how data privacy approaches can be applied to counties. We are going to go over a few different success stories and then talk about kind of the common patterns that I've seen in the roles that I've had at Okta. So I spend a lot of the time with the state, local, and education services around the United States, where they're all trying to at least handle some of the pressures that we've all had to face within the recent pandemic era. So it's definitely been challenging. And yes, I do reside in sunny San Diego, where it is not too sunny today. Unfortunately, it's a little bit gloomy, but Generally, I spend my time here, and then I pretty much travel all over. So if you ever come in contact with me, feel free to say hi as well. So let's dive into this topic a little bit. Before we kind of go into anything, I really want to make sure that I give a level set around zero trust and the background behind it. So back in 2009, John Kindervag, who used to work for Forrester, coined this idea of a zero trust security framework. The idea is that you have this mentality that instead of worrying about an internal network or an untrusted network, we should consider all the network traffic untrusted. In layman's terms, really what this means is instead of just thinking that as long as I stay within the corporate walls of my firewall, then I'm good to go. The reality is that everybody is moving around. We have people who are outside of those protected areas, and you access data from anywhere. I can tell you that I was just at my mother-in-law's house, and I was accessing data, but I had to do it with an utmost security in mind. So I had to have security measures tested on me. So I basically said, what are my credentials? Do I have push notifications? Where geographically am I located? And based off of that, dictate an experience. So important to realize that in zero trust mentalities, you have to consider that people are moving all around the world, and they still have to consume and interact with data. And as I had mentioned earlier, the pandemic has definitely shifted our mentality to make that kind of a priority. So I think also we all get this concept confused that there's not just one off-the-shelf product that you can buy that says, if I buy this, all of a sudden I have zero trust. This buzzword, zero trust, is now just part of me. John actually spoke at our Octane conference, and he pointed out something that I found particularly interesting, which is that zero trust is not a product, it's a strategy that consumes products. So if you have the mentality that people and everything is everywhere, like you see here on this graph, all of it is really centered around data. So this data that's moving around from your home networks to the on-premise to your virtualized networks, those are things that you have to consider as your vectors or your gateways into data. And oftentimes people are really considered to be on that perimeter. They're the gateways to get into your services. So if you've adopted cloud technology, if you've built a lot of on-prem systems or homegrown systems, that stuff is all protected by your IT and security teams, but it's still your responsibility to keep those credentials safe and keep your experience secure, but not annoying. I know that I get a lot of times people say like, oh, hey, I get a lot of prompts when I try to log in. It's probably a good thing. It's a good thing because it's allowing your security teams to enforce policies that say, hey, just because you're in this certain location, it seems like you're in a Starbucks right now, and I don't necessarily know that that is the safest environment. So one, please connect to a VPN or connect to some sort of global agent that might secure your network traffic. That's like step one. And then also be mindful of your credentials. So even if your credentials are just password first plus a second factor, that is something that you have to do because I'm geographically in a different location. For the people that are more internalized, like they're on the network, they're almost right next to the data center, maybe all they have to do is just do an MFA prompt. So those are the things that you have to just be aware of, especially when you're trying to have a zero trust mentality, is that people are on the perimeter. And most importantly, identity is really what is driving access, like I said, to all of these different systems. And unfortunately, we look at the breaches and the issues that we've had in the security industry as a whole, and about 81% of them have all been faulted due to stolen or weak credentials. I always make this joke, not joke, but really a fact, every time I give a presentation, because what do most people do? They set their password as fall 2021. I bet you there's at least a handful of people on this call that have at least done that at some point in our lives, because that was just natural. That's what we would do. But credential theft is kind of the prime target, especially with people having to work more remotely, interact with their peers, and access sensitive data outside of the sanctioned walls, quote unquote. So you have to keep that very much safe and keep it protected, because just passwords alone are not cutting it. It's proven time and time again that that's just not working. And then a lot of times people will just reuse the same password that they've been using over and over and over. So essentially what you want to think of is that passwords are just generally weak. They don't really solve the problem that we were initially intending years ago when we first started creating credentials. Because it all starts with authentication, the problem is that people will steal these creds. And once your credentials have been leaked, I know that I think at least everybody has been a part of some sort of breach notification from a company or an entity where they have to notify you that, like, hey, by the way, this happened. Your credentials may have been compromised. We encourage you to change your password and enable two-factor. So this has posed a real threat that I think kind of goes close to home for everybody. But it is a result of recycling passwords, poor management control around the identity, and then often authentication strategies that just haven't evolved. If you've created a system, and I've done this several times in my security and development career, where we've stood up systems for people to access, and they just get kind of a low watering pool. So they don't get the love and care like they should. And the thing is it's like, all of a sudden I want to continue to keep up with the modern trends via remote work, remote access, cloud technology. But if I have a system that I haven't adopted kind of modern mentalities like zero trust, then it becomes very difficult to protect them. And we find breaches taking advantage of this, right? A bad actor isn't going to look for something that is very difficult to get into. They're going to look at the path of least resistance. And I find this a lot in the agencies and the state and local governments that I'm working with. So I'm gonna spend a little bit of time here, but same kind of county issues that are happening are what's seeing at even the state level. So you have systems that are on fire. So what this means is that you've built, again, homegrown systems, or your systems just cannot keep up with the demand. All of a sudden, everybody's on their phone, their mobile device, and they're trying to get access to county-based services, right? That it becomes very difficult if they are resource lacking, right? I've homegrown built the system, I haven't put the proper redundancy in place, or it wasn't intended for millions of users to all log in day two because there's a pandemic unemployment problem, and people need to be able to get services. And I get to talk to stories where people are overburdened, they're overworked, they're working in these counties and they're trying their best to keep up with this demand. But if you didn't anticipate this just influx of traffic, you really see a stress on the people who are supporting these systems. So you have counties with multiple departments that each have their own priorities. They're overworked. They're again, working night and day in some cases. This isn't county specific, but it does remind me of the state of Kansas, where these individuals were just working tirelessly. And we were talking right around this time a few years ago, around Christmas time, saying, please help us get these people, the funds that they need. And unfortunately, the pandemic has caused a lot of stress on a lot of families and individuals. So to be able to come in and help state and local counties with these kind of initiatives can sometimes be, everything for a family that needs the funds and needs the support. So it's unfortunate that bad actors are at play at this state as well, because there's a huge demand. These actors know that everybody's trying to log into the system. So I might send a phishing email to Rita or Brittany if I'm a bad actor, and I'd say, here, log into this pandemic unemployment portal that you're not sure that is real, but people click on that stuff and then they harvest their credentials and then they go steal their supposed funds. So this is the kinds of stuff that's happening. And this is why we have to have a zero trust in the first place, is because hackers have kind of broken that perimeter. They figured out pretty quickly that people do access their systems outside of the sanctioned firewalls and VPNs. The other thing that we've seen time and time again in the counties is it's just lack of a friendly process. So you think about mobile devices, you think about that as, most of us do have that, right? A smartphone. we do our banking, we check our email, we do a lot of things from our phones. Our phones have evolved to be almost more of a supercomputer than some people's personal computers. It's kind of insane to be able to have that technology at our fingertips is a power. Well, when it comes to city services, if everybody's at home and everybody's on their mobile phones, they can't go into like the courthouse. What do, right? You have to be able to support that avenue. So a lot of these counties weren't ready for this change. It was onset rapidly. It was something that, to the point where all of a sudden I had to turn everything on, and that kind of goes back to overloaded systems and overloaded staff. But realistically, this is just the expectation. I'm expecting that I can just log on my phone, file my claim, and then be done with it. And I shouldn't have to go call 10 different people, do a whole exchange, fill out, tireless forms, and reduce the overall efficiency of this process. Which could take weeks to get the services that I need or require. But in order to do that, this is the kind of things that we'll face, and we'll get into how to potentially solve that as well. So from that, the other things that are catering to these unfriendly processes is that you built identity or you built applications yourself, and you just, again, have a dated perspective as far as credentials and the overall footprint of where your perimeter lies and the people that are accessing it. The other thing is that's important to realize is there's millions of citizens in some of these counties. Some of these counties are fairly large. We'll go into some of those success stories today, but yeah, that's another thing. If everybody's all of a sudden expecting a very friendly experience, you're going to hear about it, right? You're going to hear about it if it's lacking, especially when you have a tremendous amount of population, which normally would access your services maybe, part of the time. Most of the people would just go in person, but now it becomes more of a second nature. We're expecting a really easy to use service to just file a court case or such things. And then you look at a very important thing that we discover a lot of times in these counties is that there's a lack of automation. Rita has to take the document and then go hand it over to Brittany, and then manually get sign off on it, and then manually have her approve it, and then send it back to me for a final chain of process. But these kinds of things aren't automated, and we find that if I could start somebody up in the social services that could help people quickly, right, or move an entire county staff personnel to a remote sequence or a remote scenario quicker, that really does help me operate more efficiently. And the lack of automation means it's burden on somebody. It's burden on one of the departments. It's IT or security teams that have to go now figure out and spin all of this stuff up. And Brittany, you didn't have a laptop, so we have to load you with everything that we have, give you 10 different credentials to manage. And then if you forget your passwords, you also have to call me because I'm on the IT side servicing my staff and citizens. And then citizens, if they're trying to access these services, or residents, they'll be frustrated because it's like, I don't remember if I ever registered for this, or what is my password. And if those processes are tough to manage for your external population or the users that you're catering to, that also can be just tremendously frustrating. And what this all kind of comes down to is your leadership is under pressure. The people who are the county officials, the people who are making the decisions, they're getting a lot of scrutiny because there's just this overwhelming, feedback. If anything, I don't think I would describe the internet as unkind at most times. So when there's something that's not working well, you'll hear about it either publicly, or they start posting, or you'll get the pressure. And unfortunately, a lot of the times individuals get fired because they're caught off guard with this just huge demand that they weren't prepared for. So I don't like to usually use things that are scary, but realistically, that can be the outcome, unfortunately, in some cases, if you neglect your security posture, and if you don't adapt to the ever demanding, then it's going to be difficult. I'll pause and just look to you, Brittany and Rita, if we have questions. Let's go ahead and start to address those at the end of the presentation. So feel free to start asking those questions, but I will go through this and then we'll start talking through it.
Yeah, and Ryan, I actually made a couple of notes. I really like the phrase that you provided or you shared earlier about zero trust is not just one product. Now, I made a note that it's a strategy, and unfortunately may involve multiple solutions in order to get to that zero trust. So I want to hear more about that, maybe in a later slide,
Yeah.
for sure. And then the challenges that counties face, the slide that you have up, I really like that because it is so true. And the challenges, especially around, I'm going to say homegrown systems, but those older systems. So it's not just homegrown, but it could have been developed by a provider who's no longer in business anymore. And so you're keeping it going because it's meeting the need, but now how do we protect it in this whole new world of threats that we're dealing with? So, but yes, please, folks, as you think of questions, please post those in the chat, and we'll take a break here and there to invite you to ask the questions. So Ryan, back to you.
Thanks. And yeah, I mean, you look at these systems, and I spend a lot of time with developers and IT professionals that have been maintaining it, just like you said, for 20 plus years. There's also a timidness in that journey. It's, you think this has not been touched or updated for a while. I'm really concerned that if I do something, that
it's going to break it and it's never going to work again.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
It's like, don't touch it. Nobody touches System X, because we've never touched System X, because Dan has always, or Gina has always worked with that system, and they know everything. And then, oh, by the way, they might be retiring in 5 years. What do we do? Now we start to scramble. So a lot of those things catch people off guard because of the pressures of, again, like I said, like I need to have remote access, or, individuals that might have known everything, leave the organization or move on to do different things, which I'd say in the industry, you're seeing a lot of that as well too. So you're seeing, just county officials that are just, putting things in perspective with their lives and, moving on. So you have to be a little bit more proactive in those situations. But yeah, definitely. Let's keep going here. So cyber threats, we talked a little bit about that, but I want to also express, yes, we have a lot of fraud that's occurring, and bot farms. And for those that aren't aware of what bot farms are, there's just a way to take advantage of just a huge swarm of computers and servers that can do calculated attacks. So if I wanted to do something like what's known as a denial of service attack, I can get a huge resource pool to launch that attack. And oftentimes they do it in a way that's almost untraceable, or it's taking advantage of a computer that they may have compromised. So we've seen attacks where it's coming from, Jim and Jane, who clicked on a link at their home and weren't sure about it, but nothing really showed or surfaced, but a attacker might be using their systems intentionally for bad acts. So the other thing that we're seeing too is the syndicates. So there's these whole, I want to describe them as cyber gangs, but what they do is they'll get a bounty, or they'll get money fraudulently. So they might get a pandemic assistance program fund, and they might get some of those assets. And every time they do that, they operate almost like real companies, and then they reinvest in themselves to be able to expand their team. So if I have 20 hackers that are trying to calculate, now I can hire 40. And if I increase those numbers, then I can do very specific attacks. You'll see this kind of things where you'll have fake call centers give you a call and say, Brittany and Rita, by the way, your relative so-and-so is in trouble, and I need you to send $300,000 or whatever their demands are. They usually keep it in small amounts. And they often tell you to do things like gift cards. So if you hear those type of attacks, which people at Okta, security people, we're constantly berated with that kind of stuff. I think I pretty much don't answer a phone call unless it's a known number, or I know that person's going to call. Because I also have a zero trust with life. I mean, that you just don't want to get compromised. So even when my mom would send me a link like, hey, check this out, honey, I'm like, hey, mom, I'm gonna call you up right now. Did you send me this? Is this a balloon thing, or did someone get a hold of your phone? So, ask those questions to yourself that's a general just statement. But realistically, there are these people that are trying to operate in very sneaky ways just to get your information, just to get your credentials, just to take advantage of the services that you would have otherwise been privy to. And then if you get compromised, I think of the stories like with what happened to my sister-in-law. She tried to file for parental or assistance for when she was pregnant and gave birth to my niece. Someone had stolen her identity and was taking those funds. And so it was a whole ordeal. And after that, she originally didn't know what 2FA was, but then found out pretty quickly and became the standard amongst her. So now she has not been compromised since, and she's doing great. And my niece is doing great as well. But yeah, just keep in mind that these cyber threats are real and they're not stopping. In fact, I think that they're evolving and they're trying to get more sophisticated. So we have to do everything that we can to be able to protect against this, especially when you're providing services. So what do you do? So there's, and we talked about this earlier, because zero trust is not really just one product, it's usually a mentality. You have to adopt, you still have to go buy the systems that are out there. You have to go purchase systems that can do a seamless login experience, be able to do some sort of two-factor or adaptive controls to say, wherever you are on the perimeter, I still want to be able to enforce policies. In some cases, I might have a layer where I'd have identity proofing, detailed threat analytics that might fingerprint a bad actor. And then on top of that, you're going to purchase, potentially cloud solutions that would help you and de-risk yourself as much as you can. There's still a shared risk model, I'd say, when you're buying any kind of software service and you're operating them. But I'd say give yourself the advantage as opposed to a disadvantage where you're completely blindsided. And most counties can combat this stuff by putting in these layered approaches of security appliances, like insights, so you could have an aggregate log of all of your different systems, clouds, SIM tools like that, or SIEM tools that are focused on just collecting all that information that's happening. CASBs, or cloud access service brokers or security brokers, will do things like, now that we moved into the cloud, let's take a look at your footprint outside of your previously sanctioned network and take a look at that. So those are the things that you have to keep in mind. And a layered security approach really does help you kind of thwart a lot of these bad actors.
Yeah, I know we need to keep moving, Ryan, but I do
Yeah.
want to talk about the CASB that you mentioned, the Cloud Access Security Broker. Some of you may not be familiar with that term,
Yeah.
but when you start moving to the cloud, and even if you haven't moved a lot of your applications to the cloud, it's really important to know where your data is going and where it's still residing. And that Cloud Access Security Broker solution helps to identify that. I know from talking just anecdotally and talking to counties and talking to employees, our data's everywhere. And it's like, we like to think that it stays on-prem or in our secure organizational cloud, but the reality is that we have end users, and whether they have been trained properly and whether they're brand new and whether they just get my work done plays into the decision to move data somewhere else. It happens. And so it's a tough area to stay ahead of if you can even get ahead of it.
Yeah. I think about, okay, so if I told you, Rita or Brittany, like, hey, do not share this document, right? Or that's my overall footprint. Like, hey, don't share documents at all. The idea is you'll still find a way. People still try to find a way. Like if you're told no, it's like, okay, well, you know what? I'm just going to send this to my personal email and then I'll work on that file. Well, once you've removed it out of IT and security protection visibility, it's now out there, right? Versus something like a cloud access security broker or a CASB, what they'll do is they'll correlate, okay, Ryan's logged in, he's gone to his box drive, or he's tried to attach this to an email and then try to send that off. Well, a CASB might intercept that and be able to say, oh, look, we're moving files. We've just converted this file to share to everyone. That's not what we wanted. I don't want this file to leave my organization. So I'll block that email and then send a notification saying, hey, we really don't want you to move data outside of the organization. It still doesn't prevent people from taking screenshots. I know that that's, something, if you pull out your phone, you take a picture of something, you're purposefully trying to, to get this out of there. So recognize that there might be controls in the space or in wherever county or wherever you're working that are intentionally trying to prevent you from doing those or making those mistakes. So CASBs are like a catch-all that try to do just that. Sorry, Rita, you were going to chime in.
No, I'm fine. But thank you. And like I said, I don't think we talk enough about that. So I'm glad you covered it.
Sure, no problem. And so this is what citizens are expecting. Again, they're expecting a very simple to use process. If I log in, it shouldn't be frustrating. If I forget my password, I shouldn't have to bug the IT and security teams that are providing these services. The more self-service that you can provide, which kind of goes back to that automation concept, the better. And with things like push notifications, not everybody, recognizing that not everybody, picks up new technology quickly. So being able to support, a wide variety of individuals and consumption models is kind of important. So when you're thinking about multi-factor solutions and then what's like the lowest common denominator of users, having things like a voice, or a simple phone call to a home address that would give you my two-factor, those are things that can cater to, people who are just not necessarily used to that. Push notifications start to be also very convenient. I love that all I have to do is literally type in my credentials or do a password list into a system. And because it recognizes my device or recognizes who I am, and it just has to do a face detection with my phone, and I press one button with my finger and I'm in. That's the kind of experience that it's been exposed in the wild. And I think people are starting to expect that more and more. And then once I've done that, right, if I have to do things like anything with money usually requires an identity proofing situation. So using something like LexisNexis or Experian or anybody that's out there that does that, what they can do is they can say, please answer some questions. Brittany, what was your sister's height on her driver's license? Or Rita, did you own this Mazda in 2015, right? Those kinds of questions start to get asked to you that only you should really know it. I mean, I'm sure an attacker can get a hold of something if they're really calculated, but it does provide layers like I'm showing here. And then once I've done that, then I can use the county service and I can, SSO into other different systems. Crucial to these experiences is not having 10 different credentials. It's just a dream to be able to say, if I'm going to go to Los Angeles, to be able to have one credential to kind of get into services, that would just be ideal. So especially if there's millions of people that have a lot of visibility in the services that you provide, it just needs to be easy. So this is kind of the expectation when you come to citizens experience.
Yeah, and so just one more comment on that last slide. I think that the counties are getting better at the sign in and verify. Yeah. I think the prove part is where, well, there are still a lot of counties that haven't implemented the MFA from the verify perspective. So we know the challenges and the cost involved there, and we're really working to help counties where we can. But that last piece on proving, what's that one question you need to answer? As I'm sitting here thinking, I'm not sure. Like if I were to do a survey today of all counties, I think that percentage might be fairly low. It'd be interesting for any county that's on today, if you've gone to that level with any of your applications or your logins. I'm just talking out loud and thinking about, we are moving beyond what I call the two-factor to multiple factor for sure. We call it MFA, but there really is a third layer there that I don't know that we have a good handle on. And I think till a year from now, the cyber insurance providers are going to be asking that question too. Yeah,
absolutely. And, just to also be aware that, if you're working in the county and you're providing to millions of citizens, sometimes you don't have the opportunity to sit and think and try to step back and go, okay, let's have a zero trust mentality and let's buy all these different services and then let's implement identity proofing. So recognizing that there are companies and there's individuals and services that do help with that thought process. So they can highlight like, hey, did you know that you could protect your, anything that dealing with finances by providing these two layers and adopting these two types of technology? Those are good things to do. And again, if people are laser focused or their service is laser focused on that, the conversations become a little bit more enlightening and easier to have, as opposed to you having to figure this out. I know that I've been responsible for catering to millions of users before, and it's tough. It's not the easiest, and there's pressures involved, and somebody's standing over your shoulder, Rita, and saying, hey, is it out yet? Is it there? Is it working? If it's not working, like, can you make it work? Because we're running into it. We just announced this today and nothing's working. So those stresses do come out. And, to be able to have stuff that's out there, it's just night and day. It's like, take out the guesswork for me if I can. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some success stories. There's more information on our website through some of the counties that we've worked with, but I will highlight the city of LA because I actually got to work with the city of LA personally for some of the preliminary exercises of discovery and having those kind of conversations that I was alluding to. But here's some kind of highlights, and we'll go into those. Being able to consolidate services when they had multiple departments or multiple entities that all would be centered around a citizen or resident's profile was super important for them. And to be able to get these systems up quickly with the pandemic pressures, this was something that they were very much able to achieve by deploying systems like Okta. And then fraud prevented. So because they were able to have adaptive MFA, again, all of a sudden their staff was being able to log in regardless of where they were. Not just the city of LA, but other counties have also expressed like, hey, we need to get this systems up and running like overnight. So the demand for it was important, but being able to relieve some of these systems and these processes, and as they said too, which is moving at the speed of business, is what deploying this type of technology can do, was super important for them. So it was really cool to see that, seeing Okta logos proudly display on LA Bavin, which is Angelino services. Those are things that are exciting, and it's a way to showcase to the people that you're catering to, like, hey, look, we're adopting new technology. We're making it easy for you to log in. We're making it simple for you to have one credential. So they get an immediate return on investment as well, because they're able to get to the goals that they need, less frustrated staff that are overworked, and then less time spent from debugging citizen applications and systems. So similarly, Oakland County of Michigan also had to be able to do granular policy support. So they were able to achieve that. And then simplifying access for all of their staff members and secured remote work. You're starting to see a lot of these common patterns. But one of the things that they were really excited about is having the passwordless potential. So with your deploying something like Okta, or an identity provider that does support that, it allows you to envision or reimagine how you access your systems. We all are used to typing credentials. I don't think that norm is going to go away anytime soon, but there is an opportunity when you're using the latest and greatest technology to have kind of a passwordless scenario. So the situation that like how I log into my work at Okta, I click one button and that's it. I haven't had to type my password unless it's something that I have to prove, an additional layer that might be in an enforcement module, plus like a YubiKey with it using my fingerprint. So for your systems that are highly sensitive, like if Oakland has highly sensitive systems that has residence data, you might want to put those granular policies, and this is the kinds of things that they needed, is to be able to put granular policies on top of anybody accessing any of the systems and adapt to wherever they might roam. So again, having that zero trust mentality in mind. The other county that I'd like to highlight is Miramar County in Colorado. So with Okta and Auth0, they were able to support development initiatives as well as their staff. So their staff, again, had a lot of challenges when it comes to administering the systems. What you'll see in some of the tips of what to look for is their data was also dispersed as well. So you have multiple repositories of where users are living. And the most important thing is they wanted a way to be able to connect to multiple solutions. So if you have security systems like CASBs and SIEM tools that collect logs, being able to connect those solutions quickly and painlessly is also super important. So I want to have a very much secure footprint, and I want to care about where everybody is and how they access my data. But I also need to connect everything, right? I have to connect all of these systems together to work seamlessly so that a staff member doesn't have to bug. I'll use Brittany and Rita again, but Brittany, I don't have to bug you to get access to the database that has the application that I'm supporting for the county. I can get that a little bit more automated based off of security policy and consolidating these services. So once you have SSO achieved, it's really just night and day. And I've done so many implementations where that becomes just a great resulting outcome for everybody. It's like, oh, I just have to do one time and then I'm into everything. Great. And I can work from my family's house and just bring my YubiKey along the ride. Great, and make sure that my system's secure. This is all positive direction. So having those types of things occur is really where counties like Larimer County was able to achieve. So with that, I'm kind of go into, all right, so if these are the kinds of things, these are the kind of success that I could get as a county, a delighted user experience for my citizens and residents, as well as alleviated staff and time saved for the staff individuals and consolidated systems. If these are your goals, or starts to become something that's a little bit more put on you from pressures situations like we talk about with the pandemic, here's some just kind of tips that I would absolutely like to give to everybody. So what should you do? So first and foremost, you have to identify where your data is currently. You have to be able to realize that you might have different sets of credentials. You might have each department having siloed copies of your profiles, and also might have their own set of credentials as well. But realizing where, just doing an inventory list of where everything is to the best of your knowledge, gives you some great groundwork to present that to teams that can solve those problems, like identity providers or CASB solutions and identity proofing systems. Like if all of this stuff is disparate and it's not unified, it becomes really difficult to enforce it. So this is why getting that inventory of where your systems are living is super important. And in the conversation with the city of LA and the Octane presentation, everybody has differentiating priorities. Brittany's and Rita's priority might be different if we're all working together at LA County. We all might have different services that we're catering to. One might be legal services, one might be agriculture services. There could be a zillion different things that we pay attention to. And everybody wants to be heard, and everybody wants to make sure that their services are easy to use and consume. But you really should think about prioritizing security above all of those initiatives. And you can make that a part of everybody's experience without compromising, a lot of headache or, heartache of building it from scratch. I've come into systems where I'm like, wow, you've really thought through identity very well. You've done a really great effort on building this, but you ask questions like, what happens when you go down? Or do you have MFA enforced? Oh, well, we didn't build that. We just built it for passwords 15 years ago to support this one system. So when security is a priority or a mindset, if you adopt like a zero trust, meaning I think that regardless of where my people or my networks are or my devices are, I need to be able to protect the data. You have to be a little bit more proactive is again a pro tip. So when you think about that and you have that shift in mentality, like this might have been on the back burner for years, but if I can make this a priority, I might sleep better at night knowing that nothing bad happened to my systems, or again, find ways that you're adopting security solutions that can tie or unify these identities, because it also becomes drivers for innovation as well. Believe it or not, if it's all centralized, it's easier for developers or IT staff to cater and build some new services. So if I need to spin up something brand new so that Rita can work with the DMV easier, I would love to do that, right? And if I can do that in a secure and friendly manner, that's where it's kind of like twofold of a value add. So being able to prioritize security and become proactive, it's not easy to do that always. You might be plagued with just a longevity of technical debt or systems that you are maintaining, but something that you just should keep in mind. And things that you can do along your journey is centralize the identity. We talked about that a little bit, so just kind of reinforcing this here, because data gets sprawled and different credentials. It's just nothing's more frustrating when you're doing that. It's like I've tried 10 times to reset my password, but I can't. It's difficult, right? Then that results in an IT call, and then you're waiting, and oh, you were never created in the first place, Rita. Let me go ahead and create there. That's time out of your day, time out of that staff member's day. It's just, if you could avoid it with like 2 clicks or condense that time frame into minutes, you're talking the focus getting shifted on what's important for the county, right? The services. So centralizing identity is super important, because again, you really also get to have policies that can blanket over everything. Enabling strong authentication everywhere. We talked about how passwords are inherently weak. So having some sort of 2-factor at the bare minimum, just something to be provided to, again, the lowest common denominator of who is the population, residents. It's super important. I can't stress that enough. You really should have that in your mindset. So start thinking about this. And if you enable this, it's also an opportunity, like City of LA, to advertise to your citizens like, hey, we're doing our part to protect you. We're doing our part to allow you to have an easier experience, so that your mentality shift of a resident of a county services isn't something that's poor. It's something that's very positive. Oh, great. I did 2 clicks of a button, or 3 clicks, and I was able to file for unemployment very easily, which has saved me time, right? I was able to go pick up my kids from school and still do this. So those are the kinds of things that you'll enable when you have strong authentication, but again, simplified services as well. And then zero trust is the name of the game today. So making sure that you have contextual access management, meaning wherever you are, Rita, I'm going to protect anytime you're trying to interact with my data. It's super important to me, and I just want to be able to have that guarantee to the powers that be, the county officials, to say, yes, confidently we are protecting and doing our part, regardless of if a staff member is accessing the systems. And we were able to support any kind of remote initiatives. And in fact, we're now exploring that idea for any time that somebody gets sick, right? So now all of a sudden, sorry, Brittany, I'll pick up you again. Brittany's sick, and she unfortunately has to stay home and work with me, but she doesn't have to compromise the health of anybody around her, right? She can stay at home and take care of that. Or I have 2 kids, honestly. So I have 2 kids where sometimes I'm just strapped and I have to take care of them. So being able to have that remote flexibility for myself is just great. It's being able to take care of my family and then still get the work that I've done, and then not compromise the integrity of the business. So being able to support that, people do appreciate that, and we do hear a lot of great stories of, for whatever reason, individuals had to go back home to wherever they live. They may not be from that county, and be able to take care of family members in their time of crisis or need is just important. And so to be able to not compromise anything along that way is just important for us to do. So with that, I'll also kind of close just the overall presentation with, what should I do? Joyce from City of LA was kind enough to put this statement out in our Octane presentation, which was, figure out what your goal is and do what you can to protect that. So find what's important to the county. Where is this data residing? What can you do in your parts to help protect that? And if it means reevaluating systems that may have done its job for 15 years and now reevaluating that, or adopting a CASB system to make sure that information isn't accidentally shared. Whatever that is, figure out what is important to your county, and then make sure that you do what you can to protect it. And I can be the first to tell you that nobody is perfect. So don't feel like you have to get it right the first time, but be mindful that security is an always moving target. Hackers get the door slammed on them in one county, they go move on to the next county. These syndicates are coin operated and are trying to get as much information, steal money as much as they can. So if you're doing your part, it becomes harder for them to do that. They still get creative, but let's make this difficult for them is my mentality there. So with that, I think we have about 8 minutes for questions, or any kind of discussions or any concerns that anybody has, but really appreciate everybody's time again, just in case you have to go.
Right. And as I'm watching the chat to see if there's any questions, but I would like to just add a couple observations, and that is, knowing what you need to protect, knowing what that gold is that you need to protect, and then how you're going to protect it. And with the passing of the infrastructure bill, there's a fair amount of money, $1 billion, that's going to be allocated across the states based on population, that counties are going to have the ability to draw down a portion, of course. And if now, this is my priority, this is my number one or my number two, then you're going to be in a really good place as a county CIO, IT director, or whatever your position is, to be able to say, hey, here's the cyber money, here's what we need it for, and here's why. And so, I can't reiterate enough how important multi-factor authentication is. And looking at not just, there was that one slide you showed about the network context, the location context, and I forget what the third one was, but that, it's not one solution that's going to solve the entire problem, or put the right protections in place. So everyone that's still on, any questions at all for Ryan, please speak up, raise your hand. At the bottom you should see an option, potentially in the participant list, for raising your hand. We'll give you a minute. Reminder that there were some links shared. In less than 2 weeks, we are going to have the quarterly cyber simulation for insider threat, which isn't, you may think insider threat, oh, that's the employee who purposely does something wrong to jeopardize the network, but there's so much accidental that happens. And so that scenario is going to be played out the very, very end of November. And thank you, Brittany, for posting that link in the chat again. So Ryan, I don't see any questions at this point. Great information that you've shared. We'll have a follow-up email out to all the registered attendees, and with the link to this recording. So I want to thank Okta and thank you for the information that you've shared today. So everyone, you get 5 minutes back in your day.
Thank you so much, and appreciate everyone's time. And if you were too shy to ask a question on a recorded session, feel free to shoot me an email. I'd love to hear from anybody. So I know sometimes when you're in these situations, you're like, I don't want to say anything because I got to leave or whatnot. But feel free to ask questions. And then again, remember, if you got nothing from today's presentation, I'll leave you with this. Just be proactive with your security strategy. Zero trust is a great way to have a good mentality framework, and just let's all work together as a group of people and get rid of some of these bad actors. So thank you again.
All right, thanks again. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Ryan.
Bye.